Hi, today we'll be talking about the freedom of the human person. What is freedom? Or what truly is freedom? Is freedom about doing whatever we want? Or is it about doing what we ought to do? Okay, and I'm sure this topic is very essential to unpack and to learn, is because wherever we go as a rational being, freedom is already embedded there. Therefore, in this particular episode of our Philo Talk, let us unpack what truly is freedom all about, and let us try to cure our ignorance that clouded our reason in understanding about freedom, and basically on how to apply that the claim of being free person. Okay, so freedom have a different meanings. It depends on a specific context. For example, political freedom. So we can simply define in the political freedom that we are free to exercise our political rights, our political views, our political ideas and understanding. Economic freedom, we may simply say or define it, we are free to do something for the means of economic gain, or to acquire something, or to work for to improve our status quo when it comes to our economic. Social freedom, freedom of the human person in the context of the society. Emotional freedom, are we free to express, to share our emotions, our struggle? Spiritual freedom, are we free to exercise our own religion, or to practice our or to do any of our religious practices? So as you can see, freedom is claimed to be applied in a different context. Yes, it is right. But the main purpose why I am here sharing with you about the freedom of the human person is basically to bring us back into the a traditional or classical definition of a human freedom, and in trying to understand and use this particular definition or traditional definition of freedom into a different context or a different view. Therefore, to unpack this idea of the freedom of the human person, let me present with you the three basic different views or issue between the freedom or the will and necessity, which is precisely a product to that is freedom. So first view we have here the determinism. Second view we have libertarianism, and then the last view we have the compatibilism. So after unpacking these three different views, I am going to bring you to the idea in the context of the Thomistic thought or school of thought as a critique according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Of course, when we talk about Thomistic thought or Thomistic school of idea or philosophy, it adheres to St. Thomas Aquinas. But before that, let's start with determinism. This view on determinism says it is the philosophical proposition that every event, including human cognition and behavior, or decision and action, is causally determined by an unbroken chain of prior occurrences. Therefore, when we say it is determined, what exactly determined is those causes. So there is something that determines us before we make the choices. Or so to say, this factor or causes are actually the factors that affects our decision making behavior or action. So basically, On the view of determinism in the context of human freedom, here, human person is not free, or freedom is an illusion. Why freedom is an illusion according to this view? It is because our will is always determined by something. We cannot do something, we cannot will something without this process, without the prior cause that affects us to do something, that affects our certain behavior, that affects our thinking, that affects our action. So for example, your action taken by attending your classes is determined by the idea or the cause that you want to pass the course. Second, the reason why you work hard, study hard, stay late at night, complying all the requirements, is that because that is a product of your will to do that, but that course of action is determined by something, and that something may be your idea or your desire to pass the course, or your goal for the better and brighter future. So determined, we can say what makes me think right now is determined by something. What makes me happy right now, it's because of something. There's a causes or reason. Therefore, I'm not free. The reason why I'm doing this right now, it's because of something. So there's a cause of something. There's always a cause. Therefore, it is determined. That cause is always the reason, is always the reason that cause to what we do right now. So to simplify it, as I said it, freedom is an illusion because our actions, our decisions, our behavior, even up to our thinking, is not a product of freedom because we can will to do that, but it is because it is determined. Therefore, to say, I am free, no, you are not free. You cannot exercise your will. It is just the product of that prior process. If you are hungry, and then that you will tend to eat. Why you eat? It's because you are hungry. You eat not because you decide to eat. You eat it's because you are hungry, and that's the cause. Okay, that's determinism. Applying this view on determinism into a different specific context, we have here biological determinism. So take note of it. We try to understand. Biological determinism says it's a behavior is influenced by a biological forces. Example, genes, hormones, or evolutions. So therefore, in the context of a if not perennial, but a contextual analysis of the LGBTQIA plus community, why we have to respect them about their claim, it is because has something to do also with this biological determinism. Because one student of mine, when I asked him about, is it a choice, it is your personal choice to be a gay, and the fortunate response that I got from him is that, no sir, it is not a product of my choice. It is not a product of my decision. It is not a product of my environment that influenced me to become a gay, but it is because a product of my hormones. And it's, of course, it evolves. Second, is it your decision to be born as a woman or a man? No, that is a product of your genes. Is it a product of, of, of your sexuality? Why you're born a man, why you're born a woman? Okay? Second is to acknowledge environmental and influences too. And then into the low level of serotonin. So that's in the biological aspect of understanding uh, determinism. Okay. The second, we applied deterministic point of view into the environment, and we have this environmental determinism. It says behavior is controlled by the features of the environment. B.F. Skinner is popular in this study on classical conditioning, that our behavior, our action is always affected by our environment. And what determines the course of our actions, behaviors, and decision is our environment. Next, we have psychic determinism. We have Sigmund Freud in his psychosexual stages. We have id, ego, super, and superego. For example, if you have the pleasure of eating chocolate, and then you tend to eat chocolate, so your action, your behavior is determined by that id or pleasure principle that we have in psychosexual stages of development according to Sigmund Freud. We have also the ego, what we call the law principle, the ego that decide which is good and which is evil. So, and that exactly what determines why you choose this because it is good, why you avoid this, it is because of evil. The super ego, the moral principle, the part of our consciousness that always choose what is good. So you choose what is good, not because you are free to do that or to choose that, it is because it is determined by your super ego. Simple as that. Therefore, it is determined. Freedom is an illusion. Third, or the last, is the scientific emphasis on the causal explanation. So this is exactly the backbone of the trend or popular trend in our modern times, the atheistic point of view is actually a critique or a product of the scientific or causal explanation that claims we are just part of the causality of the universal cosmos or universal cosmic causality that claims science is based on the idea of cause and effect, therefore we can make prediction. So we can know the future, we can predict the future through the series of events. For example, I can predict your future. I can predict that you will fail in my class if you are not doing well in my class, if you are not doing your assessments and submitting your desired tasks or required tasks. So I can predict your future in our philosophy class. So that is why if we try to look at it, it's quite true. It's really true that our actions, behaviors, and even our thinking is determined by something. That is why we have the cause or because. I do this because, I do that because, I think of this because. So there's a cause. The second view is quite contrast to determinism. We have libertarianism. Libertarianism is the view that humans have free will. We human beings have free will. It's opposite to determinism. In the deterministic point of view, we don't have free will because it's always determined. And in this view, we have the free will, and that we have the freedom to choose what we want, and that our choices are not predetermined. Therefore, we have freedom. It allows us the existence of the concepts of good and evil because people have the capacity to do either of those with the ability to have chosen the alternative. Many religious people are libertarians, and some use the existence of free will as proof of a divine creator. So, from deterministic as opposite to libertarianism, it is not confusing to understand. If libertarianism, freedom or free will is an illusion, here human beings have the freedom. Why? Because whatever the cause of our actions, decisions, emotions, as to the deterministic point of view is concerned, we can still choose the alternative. We can still make a decision. For example, if you are happy because there is something that can exactly make you happy. On the next event, you can make a decision not to be happy because you did not do that something that exactly makes you happy. Another example, if the course of your action to study in your philosophy class is determined by your goal to pass this course and to learn more about philosophy and to expound your critical thinking in the context of libertarianism, you do that because you will it. Did you see the difference? Your action in the in the deterministic point of view is determined by your goal to learn and expound in philosophy and improve your critical thinking skills. In libertarianism, that happens because you will to do it. You will it. That's libertarianism. Therefore, in this context, human person has a free will. Okay? So for example, suppose that someone thinks that the Bible forbids same-sex marriage. John Rawls would say that even if the majority agrees with this view, it can impose it on others. They wouldn't accept what the Bible says as a reason. That is why a lot of us nowadays are proposing or pro same-sex marriage. Why? It is not because it is what the Bible is saying, but it is because of what their popular reason are conforming. It is because what the popularity of the society or the popular society is agreeing, and that has something to do with reason. A reason that provides enough justification to support the argument on same-sex marriage. Second, this doesn't mean you have to come up with reasons that absolutely everyone could acknowledge as the same with the Bible, but you only have to provide reasons to reasonable people. John Rawls calls this exactly the public reason. So therefore, even a lot of Christians, baptized Christians or non-Catholic Christians are pro same-sex marriage. Why? It is exactly an influence from the idea of John Rawls' philosophy, the public reason. That if the public people or the society popularly support same-sex marriage, and that is enough to provide reason to convince people that it is okay to have same-sex marriage, and that's freedom, libertarianism. Okay, so the last one is compatibilism. Compatibilism, free will is compatible with determinism. Take note, in this context, determinism, libertarianism, we have in the middle compatibilism. Why compatibilism? Because what determines, the cause that determines is compatible with the will. Okay? To have free will is simply for one's choice to cause one's action. Example, free will is a power of acting or not acting according to determinations of the will. David Hume said it. If I had chosen to act differently, then I would have acted differently. So how do I simplify it? Let's say determinism, libertarianism, there's compatibilism in the middle. According to determinism, there is a cause. According to the libertarianism, there is the will. According to compatibilism, this cause and will are compatible to one another to make an action. Did you now see the difference and did you get the idea? Determinism, there's a cause why you do the action. Libertarianism, there is the will to do the action. That is why they are compatibilism or compatible. In this context, David Hume would say determinism and libertarianism are in some way compatible to one another, and that's exactly what makes a human person responsible to the course of his action. Why? It's because he know the cause, he will to do it. So to the compatibilist therefore says that for an action to be free, there must be these three things. First, there must be no compulsion or external or outside of the one performing the action. It is your choice. There's no other external factor that affects you to do the action. Second is the immediate cause of an action is because of an internal, the will. It's your will, psychological cause within the person. That is, the action is performed because of a wish, motive, or desire within the person. Third, in a given situation, the person, if he or she wanted, could have acted differently. So if you can see this, to make the person free, there is the cause, there is the will, and you have the alternative or the freedom or the given freedom whether to do it or not to do it. Okay, so to compare exactly these three different views, we have the determinism. Hard determinism says everything has a cause, freedom is an illusion. For the compatibilism, everything has a cause, the will is a special type of cause to do the action. And libertarianism, the will is the metaphysical, then therefore reason governs the will. And the will to do good is a product of the reason, because reason would always guide us to what is good. And therefore it says in the context of libertarianism, human person is free. So but take note, we don't end with the libertarianistic point of view that John Rawls are trying to convince us with his philosophy on the public reason, because in today's context, there's a trend or public reason on death penalty. Take note, in today's context, there's a public reason that supports death penalty. In today's context, there's a public reason that supports same-sex marriage. In today's context, there's a public reason that supports divorce. Okay, so we don't have to end here that it is because we are free and then we can somehow adhere to the public reason. So to give you into a deeper understanding of the human person, so that we arrive exactly to what we call authentic freedom, is to adhere these three different contexts. One is to ask questions regarding the nature of freedom. What exactly the nature of freedom? Is it enough to say the freedom is deterministic? Is it enough to say freedom is a libertarianistic? Or is it enough to say freedom is compatibilistic between the deterministic point of view and the libertarianistic point of view? Okay. The second is not an opposite of discipline. Authentic freedom is not is not an opposite of discipline. They can coexist. The third, it has a rootedness. Therefore, speaking of the rootedness of human freedom, not as deterministic, not as a libertarianistic, not as a compatibilistic, but according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The generic definition of freedom is the ability to do what one likes. But the problem here is that if we substantiate freedom as the ability to do what one likes, and therefore we arrive into the conclusion that people may have a different conflicts to one another because each person might have different likes. So the Catechism of the Catholic Church, or CCC 1731, defined freedom this way. It says, freedom is the power rooted in reason and will to act or not to act. Take note, to act or not to act is a libertarianistic point of view. To do this or that, and so to perform deliberate actions on one's own responsibility. That is compatibilistic point of view. By free will, one shapes one's will. Therefore, the Catechism of the Catholic Church exactly summarizes the three different views: deterministic, compatibilistic, and libertarianistic. So a critique to this Catechism of the Catholic Church definition on freedom, let me give you the idea of St. Thomas Aquinas, a Thomistic point of view. Take note, we now have four: deterministic point of view, libertarianistic point of view, uh, compatibilistic point of view. We have the last one that would summarizes these three different views, the Thomistic point of view, as a critique to the definition of the Catechism of the Catholic Church about freedom. It says, if freedom is a power, take note, it is a power that is rooted in reason or in the intellect and will. Therefore, according to St. Thomas Aquinas on his treatise of freedom, human person has a two faculty of the mind, the intellect and the will. The intellect is to truth and the will is to good. Therefore, our intellect, guided with reason or with the use of reason, is to know the truth. Why we rationalize, why we use reason? Because we want to know the truth. Therefore, the object of our intellect, we have the will and the intellect. The object of our intellect is to know the truth. No other than that, to know the truth. And the object of our will is to choose what is good. Therefore, the perfection of the human faculty of the will and the intellect is to know what is the truth and to choose what is the good. Now, how do we exactly know that our freedom is properly used and utilized? First, is our will guided with the truth by the use of our reason, or our will is guided by our own emotion? That is why the study or the idea of freedom per se is enough to understand and evaluate our state of life right now. For example, if you are sad right now, then ask yourself why you are so sad right now. And then by asking why, your intellect will lead you to the truth or the causes, which is deterministic, and the reason, which is libertarianistic, is enough to guide you to the truth why you are sad. And then your will, by knowing the truth why you're sad, your will give you the light to choose what is good, that will certainly lessen or stop or solve your feeling of sadness right now. So therefore, human freedom, in understanding or in the context of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, is a power. It is not just something, but it is a power that is always rooted in our intellect. Why freedom should be rooted in our intellect? It's because it leads us to authentic existence or authentic freedom. If you got the authentic freedom, you would have the authentic existence. Why? You can never be wrong. Your action is always guided by your intellect. Your action is a consequence of your intellect. Your intellect that will lead you to know what is the truth, and your will that lead us to choose what is good. Putting a little meat of theology here in understanding the wholeness of the human person is that person can attain the highest good, the summum bonum, which is the eudaimonia, the happiness, if we always to choose what is good. And the only way to know or exactly know that what we choose or what we do or what we act right now is good, it is precisely because of our intellect. By the use of our reason, we know the truth. So basically, applying freedom of the human person into our personal life, into the course of our action every day. Don't make any decision as a product of your freedom without passing it first through your intellect, because your intellect will tell you what is the truth, and your will would always uh, affects you or force you or moves you or drives you to choose what is good. So last one, there's a popular issue now today in the context of politics, a war between the Aquino faction that has been adhered to the Aquino faction and the Marcos faction. So what is truth there? What is truth about the faction of Marcos? What is the truth about martial law? Okay. Then what is the truth about Aquino? What it is very important before we give some comments to understand and even to apply that particular. We are free to criticize. We are free to say anything. We are free to do whatever we want, but we cannot escape the consequence of our action. Take note, we can never separate freedom from responsibility. Why? Because responsibility comes after when you have the full knowledge of the action, you choose it, and you choose the alternative. You have the alternative, you choose it. So that is why freedom and responsibility can never be separated. Let's say we can go back to the popular reason of defining freedom that says I can do whatever I want because this is what I want. Okay, you can do that, but you can never escape the consequence of that action. It is easy to say I can do whatever I want because this is what I want. I can take whatever I want because this is what I think. I can choose whatever I want because it is what I want to choose. But what about the consequence? You can never free to escape that, because whatever you do, you are accountable to it. You have to face it. That is why the only way to avoid the unwanted consequences of our actions, it must be we have the full knowledge of the consequences of our action. And that's exactly where deterministic point of view comes in, that we can predict the future event coming from the causes. So you have to think at first, what exactly the possible consequence of my action if I will do this? So if you think it is bad, then don't do it. So is it morally right to do this or to make a decision this way? So you have to consult your reason. Okay. So I hope you learned something for today. And that's it for the freedom of the human person. Don't forget that it is always rooted to our reason, which is to know the truth, our intellect, and to will, which is to choose what is good. In that way, you will have an authentic freedom, and you can never feel being constrained as a punishment. But it is not a punishment to know what is the truth and choose what is good. It is exactly what makes the perfection of your freedom, or simply to say it, the perfection of our freedom, which is embedded by the will and the intellect, is to truth and to good. Thank you so much. See you next time.